Within the first 7 seconds of meeting someone, your brain has already formed a judgment, not a considered opinion, not a reasoned assessment. A judgment fast, automatic, and operating entirely below the level of your conscious awareness. And here is what makes that fact genuinely disturbing. Most of the time, that 7-second judgment is not based on what the person said. It is based on signals they almost certainly did not know they were sending. Human beings are transmitting information constantly. Through the way they hold their body, through the microexpressions that cross their face before they can control them, through the gap between what their words say and what their voice communicates, through the things they choose not to say, and the timing of what they do say. And most people walk through the world completely unaware of this, both the signals they are sending and the signals they are receiving. Today, we are going to change that. We are going to decode the psychology of reading people not as a party trick, not as a manipulation technique, but as one of the most practically important skills a human being can develop. The ability to understand what someone is actually communicating beneath the surface of what they are saying is the foundation of every significant relationship, every successful negotiation, and every moment of genuine human connection. Subscribe before we go further. Let's get into it. Signal 1. The body never lies, but it speaks a different language. The first thing to understand about reading people is that the body and the mouth are two separate communication systems, and they are not always saying the same thing. When they conflict, the body is almost always telling the truth. This is not because people are dishonest. It is because verbal communication is conscious and controlled, while body language is largely automatic and unconscious. When someone tells you they are fine, they are making a conscious choice about what words to use. But whether their shoulders are pulled inward, whether their arms are crossed, whether the muscles around their eyes are engaged, when they smile, these things happen before and below conscious control. The single most important principle of reading body language is not memorizing what specific gestures mean in isolation. It is learning to read clusters and learning to read change. A crossed arms posture in isolation means almost nothing. Some people simply find it comfortable. But crossed arms combined with a slight backward lean, reduced eye contact, and a shortened response length, that cluster means something. And a person who was open and relaxed 10 minutes ago, who has now adopted that cluster, that change, means something. The body is not sending you coded messages. It is expressing in real time the internal state of the person you are with. Your job is not to decode a secret language. It is to pay enough attention to notice what is actually there. Hit the like button right now if you have ever had the experience of knowing something was wrong with someone before they said a word. Because that instinct was not magic. It was your brain reading signals that your conscious mind had not yet processed. Signal 2. The face has 43 muscles, and most of them tell the truth. Paul Ekman spent decades studying the human face. What he discovered, and what has been extensively replicated since, is that certain emotional expressions are universal. They appear across every human culture ever studied, including cultures that had no exposure to outside influence. And they appear before the person making them can suppress them. He called them microexpressions, emotional expressions, that cross the face in a fraction of a second, often as little as 1/25th of a second, before the person can control or mask them. These microexpressions represent the actual emotional state the person is experiencing in that moment, regardless of what their words are saying. There are 7 universal emotions expressed in microexpressions: happiness, sadness, anger, fear, disgust, contempt, and surprise. Each has a specific muscular signature, and while most people cannot read them consciously at full speed, Training your attention to catch them even at the level of noticing that something briefly crossed someone's face that did not match what they were saying is one of the most powerful tools for understanding what someone is actually feeling. The most significant of these for everyday reading of people is contempt. Contempt is the only asymmetrical facial expression. It appears on one side of the face only, usually as a slight raising of one corner of the mouth. And unlike anger or frustration, which are often visible and acknowledged, contempt tends to be brief, controlled, and deeply revealing. It signals not just disagreement or displeasure, but a fundamental sense of superiority toward the target. In a relationship, repeated microexpressions of contempt are one of the most reliable predictors of serious dysfunction. In a professional context, catching a flash of contempt in a negotiation tells you something important about how the person across the table actually views you. You do not need to become a microexpression expert to use this knowledge. You simply need to become someone who looks at people's faces when they are talking, which, in a world of screens and distracted half-attention, is already rarer than it should be. Subscribe right now if this is giving you a new way of seeing interactions you have been in without fully understanding. Because the next signals go even deeper than the face. Signal 3. The voice carries what the words conceal. Albert Mehrabian's famous research, often misquoted as saying that only 7% of communication is verbal, was actually making a more specific and more useful point. When the verbal and nonverbal channels conflict, people rely predominantly on the nonverbal. The tone and the manner of delivery carry more weight than the content of the words when they are telling different stories. Your voice changes in ways that are extremely difficult to fully control when you are experiencing strong emotions. When someone is anxious, their vocal cords tighten slightly, raising pitch. When they are concealing something, they often over-control their delivery, producing a flatness that registers as slightly unnatural. When they are genuinely enthusiastic, the prosody of their speech, the rhythm, the emphasis, the rise and fall of pitch carries a spontaneity that controlled speech cannot replicate. The most reliable vocal signal is the hesitation pattern. Normal speech contains hesitations, brief pauses, filler words, self-corrections. These are how the speaking brain keeps pace with the thinking brain. But the location of hesitations is not random. When someone pauses before answering a question about facts, they are usually searching their memory. When someone pauses before answering a question about their feelings, they are usually deciding how much to share. And when someone speaks with unusual fluency about something they would normally need to think about, they have often rehearsed what they are saying, which is information in itself. Signal 4. The gap between what people say and what they ask. One of the most overlooked signals in reading people is what they choose to ask about. The questions people ask reveal their assumptions, their concerns, their priorities, and their fears far more reliably than the answers they give. When someone in a new relationship asks repeatedly about your past relationships, they are telling you something about their insecurities and their framework for understanding people. When a colleague asks, within the first 5 minutes of a meeting, who else was consulted on a decision, they are telling you something about their need for status and inclusion. When someone asks you a question and then immediately answers it themselves, they are telling you something about their relationship with listening. Questions are not neutral requests for information. They are windows into the questioner's mind. The question reveals what the person is thinking about, what they are worried about, what they are trying to understand or control. And a person who cannot be in a conversation without asking questions, who needs to understand, to categorize, to know, is telling you something about their fundamental relationship with uncertainty. The counterpart of this is what people do not ask. The person who learns that you have been going through something difficult and does not ask a single follow-up question is telling you something about their capacity for or interest in your inner life. Not always, sometimes people are distracted or managing their own things, but consistently not asking, consistently steering back to their own experience, consistently failing to demonstrate curiosity about yours. That pattern tells you something. Signal 5. How people talk about others tells you how they will talk about you. This signal is simple, consistent, and almost universally overlooked. The way someone talks about the people who are not in the room is the most reliable preview available of how they will eventually talk about you. The person who speaks about their ex with contempt and assigns them all the blame for what went wrong is telling you something. Not necessarily that they are a bad person, but that they have a pattern of seeing themselves as the wronged party, and that the person who eventually occupies the role of X in their narrative is going to be assigned a similar role regardless of what actually happened. The person who speaks about their colleagues with dismissal and skepticism, who seems to find something wrong with almost everyone they work with, is showing you their filtering system. That system does not stop operating when they look at you. They are applying it to you too right now, and the only reason you are not seeing its output yet is that you are still new enough to be in the generosity window. The person who can speak about people who have hurt them with genuine complexity, who can acknowledge their own role in difficult situations, who can hold the humanity of someone who wronged them alongside the reality of what they did. This person has something genuinely rare. The capacity to see other people as full human beings rather than as characters in their own story. Signal 6. What people do with silence is one of the most revealing communication tools available, and one of the least studied. The way a person responds to silence tells you an enormous amount about their internal state, their comfort with uncertainty, and their relationship with other people. The person who cannot tolerate silence, who fills every pause with words, who becomes visibly uncomfortable when a conversation lapses, who asks a question before your answer to the previous one has fully landed, is telling you something about their relationship with their own mind. Silence requires sitting with whatever is there. The person who cannot do that is managing something. The person who is comfortable with silence, who can let a pause breathe, who does not feel compelled to fill every gap, whose presence does not become anxious when words stop, is usually a person who has done enough internal work that their own company is not threatening. In negotiations and difficult conversations, the ability to let silence sit after making a point is one of the most powerful tools available. Most people will fill silence, and what they say when they fill it is often more revealing than anything they said before it. Signal 7. The consistency between public and private behavior. The final, and perhaps most important signal of reading anyone, is not something you can detect in a single conversation. It is something you can only observe over time, but once you start looking for it, you will see it everywhere. Watch how someone treats people who can do nothing for them. The waiter, the parking attendant, the junior employee, the person on the phone, the stranger who makes a small mistake. The treatment of people who have no power in the interaction, who cannot reward the person's behavior with status, with approval, with social capital, is the truest available data point about who someone actually is. Because the way we treat people who we have nothing to gain from reveals the values that operate below strategy. The person who is warm and attentive with people of status and cold or dismissive with people of lower status is showing you their actual hierarchy of human value. They are not being rude to the waiter because they are having a bad day. They are being rude to the waiter because they believe, at some level, that the waiter's feelings matter less than their own convenience. This signal is the one that most reliably predicts future behavior in relationships that matter, because the same values that produce dismissiveness toward people of lower status will eventually produce dismissiveness toward you in the moments when you are vulnerable, when you need something, when you temporarily occupy the position of needing rather than providing. Reading people is not about judgment. It is about information. It is about seeing what is actually there rather than what you hope is there or what you fear is there. And the more accurately you can read the signals, the body, the face, the voice, the questions, the patterns of speech, the treatment of others, the better equipped you are to make genuinely informed decisions about who to trust, who to invest in, and where to place the parts of yourself that are most worth protecting. Closing 7 signals. 7 windows into what is actually happening beneath the surface of every human interaction you have ever been in. The body expressing what the mouth is managing. The face showing, in fractions of a second, what the words deny. The voice carrying the emotional truth that the content conceals. The questions revealing the mind of the questioner. The way someone speaks about others, showing you exactly how they will eventually speak about you. The relationship with silence, telling you about the relationship with the self. And the treatment of people with nothing to offer, showing you what someone values when no one important is watching. None of these signals are infallible. Human beings are complex. Context matters enormously. And the goal of reading people is never to reduce them to a single data point. The goal is to see more clearly, to add signal to the noise, to make your perception of other people more accurate and less driven by what you want to see. The most dangerous thing you can bring to a relationship, any relationship, is a willingness to explain away what you are actually seeing. To rationalize the signal, because the alternative is uncomfortable. To decide that the contempt you caught was a trick of the light, that the pattern of dismissiveness has an exception this time, that what you know is not what you know. Reading people does not protect you from everything, but it gives you something that nothing else can fully replace: accurate information. And accurate information, used with wisdom and care, is the foundation of every genuinely good decision you will ever make about another human being. Hit that like button if this gave you tools you are going to actually use. Drop in the comments which of these 7 signals do you think you already read instinctively without knowing it. Drop the number below. I read every single one. And subscribe before you go next week. We go deeper into the hidden language of human behavior. You do not want to miss it. Until then, start paying attention. The signals have always been there.